Hey, Corey MacArthur here, your realtor online with RE/MAX, and we're here at the beginning of February of 2019, and I wanted to chat with you a little bit about a little caveat of the mortgage market here, and the reason being is that it's been about a year since the federal government brought in a new rule around mortgages and the new stress test, which some of you have likely heard of and some of you may not have. So if you haven't, I'll give you a quick recap, but basically what it was for anybody who had an insured mortgage. And an insured mortgage is if you don't have greater than a 20% down payment, the government requires that you get insurance on that mortgage, or they mandate that lenders require you to get insurance. So whether that's from CMHC, which is actually a Crown corporation, or a private company like Genworth, those are the two most common places to find mortgage insurance. But basically, if your down payment is less than 20%, so a lot of first-time home buyers, for example, then it requires that you actually get mortgage insurance on that property or on that mortgage. And the stress test that came out basically stated that anybody who requires that, or anybody that doesn't have 20% or more, have to pass a stress test. And that stress test is that the lender is going to look at you, and let's say interest rates are at 3.5%. They're going to pretend like they're actually 2% higher, so at 5.5%. And then what they're going to do is they're going to look at your income versus the debt you want to take on at that 5.5%. And there's a certain ratio that needs to be hit. A lot of times it's like anywhere from 32 to kind of 42%, meaning that debt can only be responsible for about 42% of your income max. Now you push interest rates up 2% higher, that makes the cost of purchasing that house significantly higher, which in turn decreases what you are approved for. So that's how they were doing their approvals when those new rules came in last year. Now the caveat is, or what I should say first is, it's not a bad policy. The reason that the government brought it in was to basically protect people, especially those first-time home buyers, from overextending themselves, or should we see interest rates jump in the near future, that it's not going to put people in a position where all of a sudden they can't afford the homes that they're living in and they begin to default on their mortgages. We've seen that happen in the States. Back in 2008, bit of a different scenario, but the federal government is, in Canada anyways, has been very prudent that way. Now here's where the issue comes, is that when a mortgage comes up for renewal, and this is where I think that the government needs to review the policy on this. This has just kind of come out in the news lately, is that when a mortgage comes up for renewal, a lot of times if you have a mortgage with, let's say, Scotiabank will not rerun those people through a stress test, but they will know what those numbers are for the most part, and know whether those people that maybe got a mortgage before the stress test was in place, they will actually know, hey, this person will not pass a stress test. But if they just renew with the same lender, whether it's Scotiabank or TD or any of those big lenders, they don't need to be put through the stress test. They can just sign the renewal. But here's where I think the issue is that it then takes the competition out of the market, because those lenders know that these people that hold these mortgages can no longer go out and shop around once their mortgage is up for renewal, because they won't pass a stress test with the new bank, because the new bank would be required to run a stress test on them. It kind of puts it into a position where these lenders actually know that, hey, they can't go to another bank, so we are therefore most likely not motivated to actually give them the most competitive rate, because we don't have to. If they want a mortgage on their house, they're basically in a position where they have to stick with us. So we don't know exactly how many people are in a position where they may not pass a stress test, but what we do know is that the application for new mortgages is significantly down, and this may actually be a big piece of banks retaining clients and keeping clients kind of at a higher margin and making more money off the existing clients that they do have. So it's a pretty fresh idea, and those renewals are just beginning to kind of come in as well. And I think it's something that the federal government needs to keep in mind. And the whole point of bringing this policy into place was really to protect, I think, first-time home buyers or people that were certainly leveraging themselves a little bit, using a small portion of money to buy a rather large asset and putting a fairly hefty mortgage on it, percentage-wise of what they were contributing. And that was really the purpose of bringing that in. But I think in the end, it could begin to hurt those people if all of a sudden they don't pass a stress test because they don't have 20% equity in their properties, and they're required to go and take a stress test if they want to shop around to a different bank. So I would say that the government needs to revisit that idea. I think the whole point of it was to help first-time home buyers, to protect them, but also to help them. And having a bank take advantage of them certainly isn't beneficial. So sure enough, I'll get a phone call right in the middle of this video, but we'll let that one pass. And so that's kind of my thoughts on it. It's a relatively fresh news and a thought that's come to light in the news lately. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as the kind of days and weeks and months move on, and whether the federal government does make any changes, especially if we see interest rates rise, which I think we will, and I'm going to make a separate video about that. But that's kind of my thoughts on what's happening in the news today, and hopefully you found it helpful. If you have any questions about your mortgage or what's going on in the local real estate market, I would love to chat with you. Other than that, hope you're having a fantastic day, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye-bye.